And welcome to the Sterling Online Tournament for the 11th of June. The World Cup is just about to start, so I'm actually, for once, maybe a bit glad I can that it looks like it's going to be a short tournament with only 2 people here, so, but maybe somebody else will join later, so we'll see. Do you know what? Shall we give e4 a go this time? e5. Knight f3. I'm going to attack the e5 pawn. Very common start to the game. It's been known for a very, very long time, of course. And this time I'm going to play the Italian game with bishop c4. Bishop to c5. Okay, we're going to play d3. That's just quite a flexible move, keeping open a lot of options. And now I'm going to play bishop g5, which is a very active move, putting pressure on the knight on f6 castles. I don't really know what I'm supposed to do here, but I think also castling should be quite reasonable here. So yeah, let's do that. d6, adding further protection to the e5 pawn. And now bishop g4 could be an option. So yeah, interesting stuff. Also, knight a5 could be on the cards here to try to win this bishop. So I think it makes sense to play a4 here. And that way I can retreat the bishop to a2 in the event of knight a5. Having the bishop on g5 does sort of limit black's options a little bit, because of this threat. And bishop g4. I think it will now be a good idea to play c3, because that cuts out knight d4. So let's go for that. And also here d5 is not possible due to this pin, which is quite nice for me. So I'm taking advantage of the fact here that I haven't put my knight on c3 yet, so I can play c3 to control this knight's potential jumps. And yeah, h6 now. So of course taking on f6 is possible, but I think after queen f6 this will be a little bit annoying, so I don't want to do that just yet. I think bishop h4 is the correct response here, maintaining this pressure. And saying to black, if you want to get rid of this pin, you have to play g5, which significantly weakens the black king position. And after bishop g3, the bishop might be quite restricted, but it will put pressure on this d6 pawn, which again prevents on the e5 pawn, which prevents black from making the liberating break d6 d5. Black can of course reinforce this with, for example, rook e8, but this is again would leave the f7 pawn quite weak. Okay, so let's continue with knight d2, I think. Now, one way I can try to, this is sort of fighting against this bishop on this bishop being here on g4. Perhaps I can later move the queen now that I've reinforced the knight on f3. So he does play knight a5, but I don't think it's the most convenient moment to do this, because I can fairly easily meet it with bishop to a2. Tucking the bishop away here. The a4 pawn is quite well defended, and now he'd simply created a problem for himself with b4 potentially being there. So I don't feel like knight a5 was a very good move. Of course, it's an idea in the Ruy Lopez quite a lot, but typically that's where the bishop is forced away to this diagonal on c2, where it's a lot less active. I think the value of it is a lot lower when it's easier to play bishop, when the bishop can be played back and stay on this diagonal. And here it simply is the case that the knight is misplaced, and in fact tactically vulnerable as well with the bishop on c5. And this means that b4 simply wins a piece. In fact, even if the bishop hadn't been placed on c5, if it had been on, let's imagine, a7, b4 would still be winning a piece, because the knight on a5 has nowhere to go. The b7 and c6 pawns restrict its movement backwards, and my own pawns and pieces prevent it from moving forwards. Now g5 comes, but I fear a little bit too late. I simply tuck the bishop back to g3. So one thing I should watch out for is that h5 will threaten to play h4 to sort of trap this bishop, so I think perhaps on h5 I should play h3. That way the bishop will always have the h2 square, and this bishop will be forced either to exchange itself on f3, which I would not mind since I'm expecting to be up material in the next few moves, or to go back over here somewhere in which case the g5 pawn would be hanging. So I think both of those scenarios would have been very acceptable for me. So now I can take on a5, but there's no need to rush with that because, as I said, the knight is not really going anywhere fast. So maybe I can in fact start with h3 here as well. It's a little bit less powerful because the g5 pawn will not be hanging. But also I feel like I can simply play a move like queen to c2 here and step out of this pin. Anyway, and sort of in general reinforce the center somewhat. So now, for example, if I were to take on a5, which I probably will in the coming moves, I can immediately play knight c4 because the c3 pawn is not hanging after bishop takes a5. So he plays c5. Well, that gives the knight the c6 square, so it's certainly a good idea to take now on a5. And yeah, I think obviously I can consider knight c4 here, but the knight on f3 is a little bit vulnerable then because it's lost its g supporters. I'm wondering how much I really care about that. Maybe I just start with h3 though. I don't see a reason not to. The bishop goes back to h5. It might have been more effective, in fact, here to have played knight h2 instead of f3, because that would have then allowed me to move this knight without allowing me weakening of the pawn structure. But that's in the past. I think I'm still going to go for this because at the end of the day it is an extra piece off the board, and I still think this structure will be very solid for me. So let's go for it. Let's go for knight c4. Okay, so he simply goes back. Now a big idea here is going to be knight e3 to try to come into f5 or potentially d5, but I think I should probably prevent this weakening of the slight weakening of my king side. So I'm going to play knight h2, and that keeps nice control over the g4 break, in that although it's still possible, it will mean that pieces have to be exchanged off. And now knight e3. So I'm looking at both of these very big holes on f5 and d5. A hole is simply a square that the knight can access that is not possible to defend by pawns. Okay, b5. Let's go in with knight f5 here, attacking the h6 pawn. Do need to be aware that b takes a4 is the threat, but I don't find that super concerning. I could, for example, meet that by playing bishop c4. Okay, g4. So again, a couple of options here. I can take on h6. And to be honest, that does look pretty good. If I then take twice on, could then take twice on, take 3 times on g4. So yeah, that seems pretty good. Another option could be bishop h4, pressure this knight. I could also take on b5. Could take on g4 first, but I don't see much of reason to do that. It's tempting to play bishop h4 though, because his knight doesn't really have many good squares to go to. I'm still going to get to take on h6. So let's do that actually, because this bishop on g3 was not such a great piece. And now, when I take on f6, I'll be able to take back on g4 and in the process win a pawn. So that looks good. And now we take on h6 and on g4. This is threatening to play knight f6 check, which would win quite a lot of material, and yeah, he just allows this, which is, I suspect, going to be terminal. So yeah, I think that all stemmed from this knight a5 move, which didn't quite get to the point of the possession and left his pieces very vulnerable. So yeah. And we have in fact got a few more people in here this week, so that's very good news. So we might get 3 rounds, you never know. Now I know this is don't be fooled by the rating. This is a very good player. What shall we do? I think I'm going to play an Alekhine's defense, and we'll see what happens. I think I've played this on a couple of occasions before. So e5, of course, is the best move. And d4. So obviously white is gaining quite a lot of space here, but when I play d6, I'm taking the first step to sort of bite back against that. Yeah, I think bishop g4 can be played here, although it might not be the best move, as far as I'm aware. I think it's maybe you're supposed to take on e5, and play c6 or something like that. But anyway, yeah. So here we've got, eventually I will probably give this bishop up on f3. Not for the moment, of course, but at some point in the future, because that will help me to exert pressure on the center, particularly these squares d4 and e5. C4 played, so I think we just come back to b6 here. It's quite standard. He takes on d6. So now we have to be careful not to take with either the bishop or the queen here, because that would allow c5, winning a piece. So it has to be pawn takes. So this is I think a slightly more modest approach by white. Not going for all of the possible space, but sort of trying to play a little bit more in a little bit more of a controlled way. I think it might be important for me to play d5 here, because otherwise d5 from white could come, and I don't think I'm such a big fan of those structures. So I'm going to play d5. I suspect white will play c5 now. Yep. And now it's either d7 or c8. I think I'm going to go to d7. That seems a bit more sensible here. And bishop e7. So just preparing to castle. And also the bishop, I think, will later come to f6. So I do have to be careful here. There's a very significant possibility that could get overrun very quickly with some kind of knight b5 to d6, but I don't think that quite works for the moment, so I'm going to castle. Bishop f4 is a very, very sensible move, because it puts more pressure on the d6 square. So do I have to play something like a6 now to prevent this knight b5 idea? I don't really want to make such a passive move like that, but it might be necessary. Because standard moves like knight c6, knight b5 seems quite difficult to meet that. So okay, let's try a6. I guess another option is b6. But that feels quite shaky. Yeah, anyway, he has b4. What about knight c6, knight b5, b6? And then if here I can at least take on c5. Yeah, maybe that's possible. Okay. Let's try this then. It feels more correct to try and fight against the center more actively. And okay, immediately knight b5, but I think I'm going to immediately play b6 to try and show confidence. Well, let's just hope that this is the correct thing. It's a typical Alekhine position, and then it's very scary, and it always feels like you're sort of on the edge here, but at least I do have this threat. So he does go into c7, but I thought, at least anyway here after rook c8, I'd be threatening to take on c7, and the situation would not be so bad. But we'll see whether that's true or not. So now I've got two different threats in the position. One of them, of course, being to take on c5, and the other being to play rook takes c7, gaining 2 pieces for a rook. You can, of course, resolve one of these situations by taking on b6, but that then means he doesn't have the square on d6 available. So quite an interesting situation where he has to come up with something good here. So one option that I'm a little afraid of is bishop b5, because let's say something like rook c7, bishop c7, queen c7, then cb6, and if, for example, I take with the knights, then maybe he has rook c1. But I think I thought I could take with the queen there. So now he does take on b6. So that might be a better way around to do it. So how do we take back? I think it probably has to be with the knight. I think pawn takes. Well, maybe it's possible, but it's certainly interesting. Knight takes feels a little safer, I guess. But the knight will be quite badly placed on b6, being restricted by this pawn on b3. So maybe the principal decision is to take back with the pawn. So knight takes, let's say something like bishop a6, c7. No, that's not really concerning. Okay. Okay, I think I am going to take with the knight. Just because I think it might be important to have the a pawn here instead. For example, something like knight b5, I still have the option of a6. Whereas if I took with the pawn, perhaps he could play for some kind of knight b5 and a5 and a4, getting your grip on the light squares on the queen's side. But yes, I don't like the fact that this knight on b6 is a bit misplaced. And I'll try to do something about that. It might be as simple as just going back to d7. Yes, rook c1. Okay. That's it's a little unpleasant to see. So now if I take on c7, he wants to play bishop c7, queen c7, and bishop b5, which would threaten to take on c6. And it seems quite difficult to do anything about that. So I don't think that's an option. What about bishop d6 though? And rook c6, bishop f4. Well, that seems like it would be all right. If bishop d6, queen d6, and then, well, maybe he has something like knight b5, but queen d7, that seems okay. Okay, let's play bishop d6. Just try and force the game a little bit. Obviously now I'm threatening to play rook c7 without having any of these similar problems with the knight on c6 being pinned. I suppose if I had taken the pawn, then potentially could have moved this knight back to d7 to support back to b8 to support c6, but that did seem very passive. And you know, moves like knight e5 would perhaps be things that he wants to play, but they're simply not possible. For example, bishop e2. Queen e2, and then knight e5, and bishop e5, you can take on c7. So, yeah, so he gives up this bishop on, so he exchanges bishops on d6. We're going to take back, of course. And to me, it looks like knight b5 is the only move here. And okay, I said before I want to play queen d7 here. And I think that's probably the right thing to do. Yeah, let's do that. The only potential problem is that there could be some kind of bishop b5 pin in the future. But I'll always be able to take on f3 if that's a threat. So I think this is probably the right move. So yeah, let's do it. And it does take away the square from my knight, which I desperately want to reactivate somehow. So we're certainly still in a bit of trouble here, but I feel like I have quite a solid position, so hopefully I can leverage that fact. And there are potential tactical ideas here, like bishop f3, and knight e5, opening up an attack against the knight on b5. So let's see what he does. A potentially dangerous move could be some kind of knight retreat, like knight c3 or knight a3 with the threat of bishop d5. Instead he goes queen d2. Well, that's also probably quite a good move, but it does allow this bishop f3 tactic. And in fact, it's even made a slightly better version for me. But okay, is that actually good for me? Maybe not. Because he could get control over the C file there. I think I probably just have to allow that. That's at least one thing that my knight on b6 is doing that's useful. Supporting the C file. So this structural alteration has given me the passed pawn on d5, but I don't feel like that's tremendous value because it's hard to actually get it moving forward. He takes on c8. Now, I'm a little bit surprised by that because I would have thought that it'd be quite hard for him to make a lot of progress without the rooks on. I'd like to play the move rook c5 here because then I could actually take control of the c file myself. I don't see any immediate tactical problems with that, so let's give this a try. Moves like a4 could potentially be there, but I have queen c6, and if it continues with a5, then obviously he has to deal with this rook c1 problem first. But let's say he takes on c5, queen takes c5, and a5, then I would at least have knight d7. Okay, so let's go queen c6. Attack this rook on c1. I don't think he can afford to move the rook away really, so he does take. But yeah, I think now the worst does seem to be over. I'm going to tentatively say. because my queen is very active and his queen sort of struggles to find a meaningful purpose here. Obviously, you need to think about potential exchanges in this type of situation. I think an exchange of queens would make it quite difficult for me to win, but also probably don't lose that kind of position. Well, now a5 seems quite reasonable. But I think I'm going to start by playing h6 here, just to give myself some extra space in the back rank. I would have liked to have played g6 because that would have created a flight square that's on a different colour to his bishop. But I'm a little bit worried about allowing something like queen h6, although saying that, I think I was probably overestimating that as a problem. Now, I think I want to go knight d7 at this moment because he can't play f4 due to the pin, so I'll have to either attack one of my things, and I don't think that that's possible. Now, I suspect that was actually a mouse slip because queen f4 seemed a lot more logical there, but this unfortunately just loses the pawn on e5 for I think no real reason. So I suspect that wasn't his intention. But hey, you know, mouse slips are part of the online game, so obviously I've made my fair share over the years. So while I'm sympathetic, I'm not going to, you know, not accept it when it comes along. So now it's a case of trying to convert this, and as I said, it's not going to be the easiest task because his position is, you know, he's still got this assets of his own. He's got the bishop against the knight in a position with pawns on both sides of the board, and he's also got this 2-to-1 majority. However, after king a3, my king is very, very active, so I think that now it's certainly a winning position, and yeah, he resigns. Yeah, maybe I think that was just a bit unlucky, to be honest. I think the move queen f4 instead of queen e3 would have been quite difficult to break down. Although allegedly I could have played something like d4 at this moment. So maybe I should have been playing d4 a bit earlier to try and play knight d5, but okay. Just to get the pass pawn moving, but interesting stuff. So we're immediately back into the next game, which could be the last of the tournament. I'm not sure how it will work out with the players joining sort of midway through the first round. Obviously we're up against a very solid player here as well, so I'm going to play e5 on this occasion, see what happens. Let's go with the Petrov. Okay, knight c3. I don't think black has any real better options than playing knight c6 here, going into the four knights variation. So yeah, let's do that. Okay, so white has a few different moves here. I think the most popular is to play bishop to b5, called the Spanish four knights, I think. And this is the Scotch four knights with the move d4. So I think I'm supposed to take this. Not really. Although I know the name, I'm not sure what to do here. So let's take on d4. I think the idea now is to play like knight d5 or something. Or is that on the next move? I don't know. Okay. So I know that you probably shouldn't take on d4 here, because then the black queen is quite active. I feel like bishop c5 should be quite a reasonable move. And if he takes on c6, just take back with the pawn. That seems okay. If then e5, I don't know. Queen e7. Okay. Or are you supposed to play bishop b4 here? Well, we'll have to have a look afterwards. Let's play bishop c5 and see what happens. So now the bishop on c5 is sort of being threatened by this bishop on e3, because after knight c6, white would uncover an attack on it. I think queen e7 looks quite reasonable here, just to defend that, unless there's some kind of like knight b5 thing. I don't really believe that though. d6 maybe? No, but then knight c6. Queen e7, knight eb5, knight cb5, bishop b6, knight c6, dc6. Yeah. This is why it's sometimes not advisable to sort of freestyle it. Okay. I'm going to play queen e7 and we'll see. Oh, yeah, I did not see that at all. It's that's not great. Okay, it's pretty annoying to miss that. Right. Well. Mhm. Okay. Okay. So if Queen E5. No, there aren't any good moves here, unfortunately. Yeah, it's just too bad. Queen E5. There's F4, I think. Queen's just literally trapped. Okay, so guess it has to be Queen F8. And yeah, we'll try and play this position down a pawn and down a king. But then he doesn't take. Okay. I don't know why you wouldn't take there. Um. Yeah. I don't know. I guess I castle at this point. Get any castles as well. It would be nice if I could play d5 here. Um, take, 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 take. But maybe knight h6, and if it takes, then bishop h7. But I could play king h8 instead. Ah, wait, no, there's knight e7 instead, I think, and then I have to take back because it's forking my it's attacking my queen as well. So okay, I think maybe it has to be the slightly more modest d6 for now. Really don't want this knight to exist for any longer on f5. So yeah, I think given the chance, I'm just going to play bishop f5 and try and play that structure, which, to be honest, seems uh, perfectly fine. Again, I'll have a knight against bishop, but the bishop on d3 will be quite restricted by the pawn on f5, and perhaps I can later put pressure on that weakness. All of my pieces will be quite good there. Can use the e file for my rooks. think knight e3 might be quite a reasonable move for him now. You try and get more control over the d5 square. He doesn't want to exchange pieces, I think, because he has a little bit more space. I think I'd probably play bishop e6 there. Again, focus on the d5 square. This is an interesting move. I was having a quick look at. I think there's similar ideas to if I'd played d5 instead of castling. Sorry, d5 instead of d6. So I can take on d5 now. And I think if pawn takes, queen takes, there's a similar idea with knight e7. I know, but then I take. Maybe that works on the previous move as well then. Okay, so if I take, and take, and he plays knight h6, and then I have king h8, I'm threatening just to take on h6, and yeah, if he moves the bishop, I just take the queen. Okay, so if knight d5, does he want to play queen g4 first? No, but I can just take on f5. That's not a problem. Yeah. Okay. So I don't think this actually works for him, but we'll see. It's a bit scary, but I think this is the right move. So yeah, he definitely needs to have something in mind here, because otherwise I'm simply going to take on f5 and enjoy my extra pawn. So he goes knight g3. I'm happy to see that, because knight g3 isn't an especially scary move. It does threaten, of course, to take on h7, which I need to attend to. But other than that, it's not especially threatening. So what moves come to mind here? Queen g5, of course. Bishop e6. Queen c5? Maybe queen c5, because if queen g5, knight e4, but then c5 I still have that problem. Okay, let's go queen g5 then. Because this way I can meet knight e4 with queen g4, potentially. Really don't want to allow him to get his queen in to start attacking things. That's how this sort of position can go wrong. But yeah, in general, we just need to develop the pieces. I'm fairly happy to see that move as well, because that means there won't be any sort of f4 stuff going on. So let's play bishop g4, because I think this is a deceptively difficult move for him to deal with, because his queen actually doesn't have a lot of options now. He doesn't want to play either of these moves for various reasons, involving my queen on g5. Well, I said he didn't want to play it, but he does, so I guess will fool me. But now I think it's going to be a lot easier to deal with the initiative because of the lack of queens. And I should just be able to enjoy my extra pawn here. And this should now be this should probably be a winning advantage. There aren't any special features of the position that lead me to believe White's chances of holding this. I think we'd just take this one. Obviously, quite happy to exchange pieces whilst up on material. I think maybe his idea is to play the knight to e3 and then try to come around to d4, which looks quite reasonable. But okay, let's see. Knight e3. Really want to move my knight there. Something like knight d4 seems quite interesting. That way, if knight d5, I can play knight e2 and take on e1. Oh, on c1. And again, just misses that, unfortunately. So I'm just going to do that. Okay, so now king f1, knight c1. It looks like he might be able to win the material back by taking on c7, but fortunately, oh, yeah, or this, yeah. I actually missed knight f6 then. That's a bit weird. That's quite funny, but okay. This time it doesn't matter because I can simply play this and rook takes. Okay, so now instead we've got a rook endgame. F4, interesting. Rook d5 maybe. I'm trying to get into d2. Just try to bring the king in. Rook d4 to attack this one, and now we go in with rook to d2. And this ensures that his rook will be passively placed. I'm going to play d5 to enable my rook to come to enable my king to come to d6 if he plays rook e1 check. This keeps an eye on the e7 square. So now I don't think he really has anything better than just going back here, because otherwise I'm going to start munching on these pawns. And notice that once I take the c2 pawn, I now have a passed pawn on d4, which will make the position a lot easier to win. Or should do anyway. Let's try and show a bit of class here and play a5. I'm doing this to try and get two connected pass pawns, which I now have. If b5, I would have then played c5 anyway. So now it's simply a case of pushing the passed pawns up the board. Like so. I don't really care about the rest of my pawns now, because these ones will be more than sufficient to win the game. Okay. Let's come back to e6 here. Although, yeah, let's do that. This way I can meet rook a8 with rook d6 if I want to. Yeah. Okay, so f5. Take that. And rook e1. And c4, of course, not king e5. Rook e2 check. I'm just going to keep the king cut off here. Okay, I guess might as well take this pawn if he's going to give it to me. Now we're going to go in with king c3. This I think is just simply threatening d2. Yeah, d2 check, and the king will. So now king f1, we go, or king d1, we're going to go here. King will be forced to go to e2, and now rook e1 check forces the king out, and we can promote on the next move. And win the rook for the pawn, or the new queen, depending on which way you want to see it. And of course, rook is a pretty big advantage in an endgame, so it gets us the win. I was completely lost in that game, obviously, so from the opening, but then he just gave me a second shot at life, so that was nice. Yeah, queen e7, just an outrageous blunder. That should have been punished, but it wasn't. So after knight g7, it's actually not so bad because of this tactic, but yeah, really really tough game. Yeah, so if d5 here, what happens? Knight d5. Yeah, so that would have been okay. Oh, but here queen h5, and this threatens knight e7 and queen h7. So that would have been difficult to deal with. But yeah, this way around there is no queen h5. Why is there no queen h5? There's no queen h5 because of bishop f5. Okay. But if bishop f5 in this line? But if, yeah. But I guess it's just that you haven't given up a pawn here. So it's better. Yeah. And g6. Yeah, g6, bishop g6. I did see that. Okay. Yeah. But that would have still been the best move. Bishop f5. Bishop f5 and g6. Bishop g6, queen h5. And this endgame should be a bit better for white. I would agree with that. And queen g5. Yeah, and I don't know. I don't think he really had any chances here. This is just a winning endgame. I wonder if it liked my a5 move. Yeah, it's fine. Maybe not the best, but it feels nice to get these 2 points. Should we have a quick look at that first game? I don't think it was, well, it's not hugely interesting, apart from the opening, maybe. Interestingly here, I should take on f6. And oh, I missed that, wow. Just a b4 and a5 winning a piece. Wow. But yeah, this knight a5 was definitely not the best. And yeah, after that it's pretty difficult. Okay, I suppose we can have a quick look at the second game as well. So yeah, white's just a bit better here. Rather insipid setup by me, I think. But this is a good find, I think. Finding knight c6 here. And seeing that this was not so great. Or I could have played a6, knight d6, and then b6. Which would have been stronger. As if cb, I'd just take back with the queen or something, and then it's eventually this knight on t6 will be hounded out. c7, yeah, rook c8, and yeah, this is correct. So if a takes knight b5 and a4, I thought, and I thought that'd be quite hard to break down, but actually I'm just a bit better after knight b6. Bishop d6 was correct. But here I went wrong. Should have played queen b4, but this is based on a tactical oversight. So after queen d7, rook c6 was playable. And if I take with the rook, he has knight e5. Bishop b2, queen e2. And yeah, at the end of the line, we'll just get to pick off this a7 pawn and have a very nice majority on the queen side with two connected pass pawns. But yeah, I mean, it's not so easy to see in rapid, of course. And yeah, I did. I think I did mention this in the game. Rook c8 was not so accurate. Yeah, and I'm just a bit better in this endgame with the passed pawn and slight sort of weakness on e5. So yeah, we get the win in the tournament, of course, with those 3 victories. Hopefully we'll get even more people next week. And but for now, we'll see you later, and goodbye for now.